at the universities, government has decided to take action in an answer to those protests. Now, if this kind whatever you think about the protest, when it comes to the action government is taking, well, we'll discuss the specifics of it today, and especially what the consequences can be, and what would be, I think, a much better long-term solution. And then, as a secondary topic, if we have time, we can discuss the fact that it's Israeli Independence Day. Of course, I'm just learning the way sort of holidays, or at least some holidays, work in Israel. They just do it overnight, so like it like started tonight, basically. I think like 8 minutes ago, technically, at 8 Israeli, and then it sort of like finishes at the nightfall. I think is what they call it. And we'll also discuss something in relation to that. Joining me today for the reality show is Alex, and after a long time, we also have Lee Pearson joining us. It's great to have you both. And I'll go to you, Lee, immediately, since it's something you wanted to specifically discuss. So yeah, as I said, government started taking some action. We can talk about separate things. One is, of course, the revoking of visa of some of the students, although that is sort of like a separate thing. When it comes to specifically universities, we're seeing a lot of basically recalling some of the grants, refusing to send federal money, and using, for the most time, at least I've seen, using basically the universities' sort of inability to deal with anti-Semitism as a justification for it, basically as a violation of, I think it's Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. So yeah, to go, Lee, to you.
Well, can I could I tell a very brief personal story about government funding of scientific research? I'll make it brief as possible. But a long time ago, in a graduate school far away, actually it was Cornell University, Ivy League, one of these evil universities in Ithaca, New York. I was working on my PhD thesis on introspection. I was in the psychology department, and it was a very rare thing in the second half of the 20th century for there to be any work on introspection. Anyway, so one evening I went to a party given by my advisor James J. Gibson at his home, and a little party, and his wife was also a professor in the department and was a world famous developmental psychologist. And so at the party, I somehow let slip to her, well, I just said that I was doing a thesis on introspection, a dissertation, introspection. She proceeded to lecture me. This is at a party for a good half an hour. And people were clustering around listening to this, mostly irrelevant stuff about why it was a terrible thing to do a dissertation on introspection. And by the way, she didn't dislike me. She actually liked me, but that's another story. But she sure hated introspection. And she capped off her presentation after about a half an hour of irrelevant spouting. She capped it off by saying, if I were on NSF or NIMH or wherever the funding was, agencies in those days, she said, I would make sure that no research like this ever got funded. And the thing is, she was on such panels and boards. She was a major figure in the field, of experimental, developmental psychology, but anyway, in the general field. And so she was by no means the worst of them. There were much worse. For some reason, I've regretted to this day that I did not comment at the end of all this. I did not say to her, well, it's a good thing that introspection is cheap. I was tempted to say that because I don't need your particle accelerators or stuff. But the point is, research does take money, and particularly in a weak field like psychology, whatever the entrenched, to use a word Ayn Rand uses a lot in this connection, the entrenched viewpoint is, that's what gets funded. And so it stifles progress terribly. So government research is inherently bad. I think we could probably here anyway agree that in principle and the future ideal society, we shouldn't have government research at all, except I guess for maybe military stuff, for weapons and things like that. But otherwise, the government shouldn't get involved in that with universities or anybody else. But of course, we're not at that ideal state. We are where we are, and where we are now is a large amount of the research funded by done by universities is funded by government grants, and that's just the way it is. So probably most of you have read that article by Ayn Rand called I'm blocking on the name of it.
On the question of scholarships, maybe?
No, it's not that one. It's the Fairness Doctrine for Education.
Oh.
Fairness Doctrine for Education. The Fairness Doctrine was a doctrine.
Fairness Doctrine for Education.
I just got the information from my research staff back there, Shoshana Milgram. Yeah, anyway, so she's a little late, but anyway, so that's the Fairness Doctrine for Education was the article. It's a funny article. It's not, I would say, if you ask me, it's not one of her best, because she's writing about something. It's not like she's really enthusiastic. It's a stopgap measure that she's advocating, which is that given the situation that we have, well, let me just say the Fairness Doctrine originally was about the airwaves, the control of what the government controlled the airwaves, and the idea was it would require that equal representation is given on the airwaves to, quote unquote, significant viewpoints. And of course, this is a flawed policy, but it's thought, she was thinking of it as a stopgap measure that should be applied to education as well, not just to the airwaves, but to the educational system as a stopgap measure until the time, whenever it may come, that we have actual free market in research and education. And she said that it should apply to the term she used. She invented a term, semi-public universities. And semi-public are those that get federal funding and are subject to federal control. Now, she didn't say exactly which ones, so there's a question up for debate. I would say the only examples I can think of that would satisfy semi-public universities are most private universities today, such as Harvard and Columbia. They're the Ivy League, and all, Duke University, University of Chicago. All of them get funds except Bob Jones, maybe Hillsdale. There's a few of these religious institutions that don't. Otherwise, they're funded variously, various degrees. Also, students now get a tremendous amount of funding in terms of grants and loans from the federal government. That's why the cost of education has skyrocketed so much. But anyway, that's another issue for another time. So I think that the notion of semi-public applies to Harvard and Columbia, the recent targets. And what's more, if you look at what the federal government actually is asking them, is there is a battle going on, which basically is right now focused on Harvard and Columbia. Columbia basically caved. That's because they only have about 12 or $13 billion of a money endowment. Harvard has 53 billion, so their spine is a little stiffened by that. So they're trying to fight the federal government here. And the question is, what's the right thing? Who should we be supporting here? Who is it proper to support here? And I have a feeling you guys want to support Harvard. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't. Harvard is the source of, and Columbia and the rest of the Ivy League as the leaders are the source of the trouble that has plagued academia and our society for the last 100 years. Just as one example, John Dewey, the founder of progressive education, spent many years at Columbia University Teachers College. That was his center. And that Teachers College was a center of progressive education, which has had a deleterious effect on education for the last 100 years. And that's just, there are all kinds of examples. Harvard was the home of the infamous behaviorist psychologist B.F. Skinner, who wanted to have a society of psychologist kings running society. And anyway, it was a terrible, terrible influence, a denier of the efficacy of the mind as a terrible thing. And I could multiply examples, but we don't have enough time for that. There's just all kinds of examples of how the leading universities, Harvard being at the front, the Ivy League in general, have promoted the the leftward progress, if you want, progression, progressive, the leftward turn that has plagued us for about 100 years. So they are seriously to blame for that. Now, does that mean that? What does that mean in the funding case? Well, Ayn Rand was very much against, and wrote about this in the article, was very much against using federal funding to require particular points of view. She would be against. She mentioned at that time that the Department of what they called health, education, and welfare. They had all their bad eggs in one basket back in those days. The Department of Health, Education, and Welfare was requiring schools, I think Columbia mainly, was one anyway, to hire based on race and other such criteria. And she thought that should be stopped. Notice that it's been reversed now. It's now the schools that want to hire on race, and the federal government's trying to reverse that. It's flipped around somehow over the years, but it's still the same principle. She's very much against, she said, that the government should force the universities to advocate one particular viewpoint or a series of viewpoints that are all advocated by the government. She didn't want that. And of course, ultimately, she wanted to have a free market and the government separated from education for the same, as she said, for the same reasons that church and state should be separated. So that's what she wanted ultimately. But in terms of the fairness doctrine, what she wanted was that as long as we have the government intervention, there should be a doctrine that every significant viewpoint should be given representation in the students and also in the faculty and maybe in other activities of the university. That was her phrase, significant viewpoint. Now, there's no real objective way to carry this out utterly, but you can see that you could. And she had in mind trying to protect the dissenters, because the university faculties in the Ivy League, at least, are overwhelmingly leftist, overwhelmingly. And she said, the dissenters, the people, the advocates of capitalism, if there are any in the universities there, would need this sort of protection as a stopgap measure. So she wasn't saying that the government should enforce a particular viewpoint, but it should enforce a range of viewpoints. Now, the letter that the federal government sent to Harvard, I have an excerpt. I hope it's accurate. I'll just read it just a really short bit here. It says, Harvard must abolish all criteria, preferences, and practices, whether mandatory or optional, throughout its admissions and hiring practices that function as ideological litmus tests. Every department or field found to lack viewpoint diversity must be reformed by hiring a critical mass of new faculty within that department or field who will provide viewpoint diversity. Every teaching unit found to lack viewpoint diversity must be reformed by admitting a critical mass of students who will provide viewpoint diversity. So I think the key concept, and I'm always looking for key concepts to focus on, that's what I teach. In this case is viewpoint diversity. Now, that's not a very well-defined idea, but I think it's very similar to what Ayn Rand was talking about, maybe identical to, she's talking about every significant viewpoint must be given representation. So I'm basically in favor of the federal government enforcing that, not just on Harvard. You got to start somewhere, and there are some procedural questions of who should be doing it. Should it be the executive? But actually, the executive does have the power to do this, whether it's philosophically correct or not. So I'm actually in favor of it, that the government should enforce this without enforcing one particular viewpoint. That would be terrible. So that's my at least initial shot. Any you guys want to jump in on that?
Yeah, there's a lot to sort of talk about, and yeah, I mean the whole thing is sort of like the result of the mixed economy, right? We are only in this difficult situation because the government is already solving
Yes,
So then the
that's
question
correct.
is, well, there is one when we are going to trying to think how to phrase it. Basically, like if it does happen, it does have to be universal, right? So you cannot, like, it's all universities or it's no universities. Once you start picking out specific universities, that's when I start. That's when, the government is not trying to do some equal law, even if it's sort of wrong on a sort of large scale. That basically in the long term we want to get rid of that, but sort of as like a, like you say, gap sort of measure, then you have to sort of equally. And yeah, I mean, it thing that I don't like to necessarily advocate for, because you are sort of like introducing more government, but it is that some sort of thing that, if it does happen, it might not be the one at all, but we can discuss it a bit more. Let me go to Alex if she has any.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I went to the only private university in Israel, and that allowed that gave us a lot of leeway in that we were able to band together and essentially fire lecturers. I had one lecturer who was a former general who was just not sticking to the curriculum. We weren't learning anything. However, in the kind of the government institutions, it's nearly impossible actually to get rid of these people. Doesn't matter really how kind of incompetent. And yeah, I think it's a huge problem because we have this kind of like private public partnership, right? Whereby essentially like you're nearly a public institution, yet it's also a private institution. And yeah, so it's I simply don't understand. I mean, really, I have to say, over the past couple of years, I've been thinking, why on earth would anybody want to go to any of these universities? I simply really, I think it would be better maybe to join like a military school or something, or even these days. I mean, I work with a lot of people who are completely self-taught experts in their field of cybersecurity, and they write quite clearly on their LinkedIn profiles, 100% self-taught. I did not go to university. And part of me wonders, is that a signal to say, I'm not crazy, guys? I haven't had my head filled with all manner of garbage for several years. You can rely on me. Okay. Yeah, I don't really know. I don't know what the long-term plan is for any of these American universities. Maybe they're just kind of thinking, oh, our luck will never, kind of run out. People they're always going to buy into this worthless system that we've, destroyed, and we uphold.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
oh, go ahead, Daniel. Sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, well, I just want to bring in, that is something that sort of really like filled me with a dread for a long time, especially with the what we now call the campus intifada, the the protests at all universities, and not just the sort of the so-called pro-Palestinian protests, but the general both no respect for the sort of rules of the university, and so even rights in many cases, like Colombia, when they overtook some parts of university. Then the sort of universities unwillingness to even willingness to sort of enforce any rules, any standards. That really the future, like Alex says, of these universities, when there is no Okay, Irene says I'm breaking up a bit, so I'll try to
Yeah, that's true.
something else. But
A
yes,
little bit.
yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, you can go on, Lee.
Okay. Yeah, these are all good points. About the unit, let's take the universality issue. I agree that it should be universally applied. That is, the grant should be, no school should be allowed to use federal funding. Well, they should, again, we're back in principle, they shouldn't have the federal funding and we should get rid of it eventually. But as far as applying it now, I don't know whether it's possible to do it as a blanket thing all at once. I don't know. It's a political question. And certainly Harvard and Columbia are deserving of attention. I mean, for one thing, they are the places, the most salient places where the actual rights of students, Jewish students, were being violated. And it's up to the university, it's the responsibility of the university to protect those students. And they failed to do that. So that's just right there, even leaving aside all the issues of diversity in the faculty and what should be taught and who the professor should be. They've just failed at a basic level of protecting the rights against physical force, by the way, of the students. And so there's a reason to take action. Now, whether whether the funding is the right way to deal with that issue, I mean, you'd think more directly there should be some more direct way of getting them in the courts, getting the universities in the courts. I don't know, but anyway, there's a reason for going after them first. Ultimately, you'd want to go after everybody. And the issue about getting rid of professors, well, that's a whole other thing. That's in America, that's the issue of tenure. University professors at a certain point, if they go through the hoops properly, get tenure and can't be fired. And I think under a free market that would go away. But that's a whole other subject of discussion. Because the idea is that their academic freedom, which is a poorly defined concept anyway, requires that they have the inability for them to be fired. In my opinion, it's the younger faculty that really need protection for their academic freedom, and they're the ones that don't have tenure. So that whole system doesn't make any sense to me. But that's we'll see what happens. I mean, the universities may or may not survive now. There is certainly more movement, and I do believe myself that any private donors should stop giving to all of the universities, certainly to the Ivy League, that use their billions of dollars to destroy the culture, basically. I don't think anybody, I would recommend, it's up to individuals, of course. I recommend that they don't donate. So if you could cut off their funding by getting their donations and the federal funding, that would be a good thing. I'll just say one thing in favor of the universities from my own experience, even though I'm pretty much in agreement that they're bad places. I found, both as an undergraduate at Columbia and a graduate student at Cornell, that in the midst of all this horrible stuff, there was all kinds of horrible stuff. There were a few good professors that I actually learned something from that would have been hard to learn completely on my own. If you think we should be autodidacts and learn on our own, yeah, that's good. But in some areas that's hard. There's certain things about how to think about certain subjects that I learned from a professor or two or three that I had amidst all the bad ones. But of course, in order to take advantage of that, you have to be able to resist I had to be vigilant all the time against the bad stuff in order to pick out the good stuff. But anyway, that's one good thing, is that it does, by collecting all these guys that are supposedly tops in their fields, whatever it may be. Some of them actually are. Even in psychology, there were some. And certainly in a more advanced field, a more rational field like physics or physical science, say, there would be more than that. So that's one thing I could say in favor. But basically, the universities are maybe the main source of what's destroying America now. And so, yeah.
Are you able to say, do you know if there have been any kind of tangible lawsuits that have been kind of coming to the university? Because imagine you were a student, an undergraduate, and you're paying maybe what, 70 grand a year, 50 grand maybe on the
Yeah,
low end.
depending. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you have not, you've missed out on what, 6 months of that, education.
Oh, yeah.
Or you've been like, oh, we'll just study remotely. Okay. I mean, no, I mean, like I could learn that on Fiverr. I could learn that on YouTube, really.
Yeah, that came about
It's
because of COVID, of course.
oh yeah, but I
It
mean that
started
right,
with
but
COVID. Yeah.
exactly, but the that is actually what the universities reduced themselves to. They couldn't control the students. You want to have a crazy kind of terrorist supporting encampment, right? We're not going to stop you.
Yeah.
We'll just make everybody go to remote learning. And thanks very much for your 70 grand a year for the education that you could have gotten on YouTube. I mean, do you know of any big kind of
I've heard of it, but
lawsuits?
I don't actually have specific. No, I've heard that that's happened,
Mhm.
and it should.
Mhm.
I don't have any specific knowledge of that, but that's just certainly that should happen. It's going the other way, of course, because Harvard's has hired some Trump affiliated lawyers. Oops, I said I wasn't going to talk about Trump. Here it is. Anyway, they hired some lawyers that were somehow affiliated with Trump to sue the federal
Daniel,
government.
sorry, we're
on
getting
their,
a little bit of feedback from you, just so you know. I think you're yeah.
Maybe.
Sorry, Lee. No, it's not
maybe.
you. It's Daniel. It's Daniel.
Of course, Daniel.
Continue, Lee. Sorry, I just.
All right. So anyway, I don't know about this. There should be more of that, of course. And I don't know what's happened with that. I've heard there are lawsuits. Of course, these things drag on for ages. I guess we'll see ultimately.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. And I'm just saying, I'm not certain that the universities properly under a free market that they would just go away. I'm not sure they would survive, and they certainly wouldn't survive in the form that they're in. About what would happen to them. Of course, you're right. By the way, there's a huge amount of stuff you can get on the internet just for if you just want to pick up knowledge. You can get, I think, all of MIT's courses are available on YouTube or somewhere. So you could get a pretty good education in physics or engineering or something. Now, what you can't get is what I was talking about before, which I learned from something for some people, is how to think about certain subjects. And there, if you happen to be exposed to some of the top practitioners, people that are actually doing something, which some of the top universities have those. I mean, that's what the university is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about that. That's hard to duplicate with just something on YouTube. So I don't know how that would turn out. Anyway, we're not at that stage yet. By the way, some people argue that Harvard has some rights that are being violated by being attacked by the federal government. I'm wondering what those rights are. I've asked some people the question, what physical force is being initiated? Because the rights are violated by physical force or the threat of, and nothing else. So if you really want to know whether rights are violated, find the smoking gun. And where is it? And what's the physical force being initiated against Columbia or Harvard? I don't see it actually. Maybe I mean I can think of some kind of sideways arguments about it, but I really can't see anything. Maybe you guys know of something that would count as a initiation of physical force when in this kind of situation where they're taking away a grant, when they're giving a grant, which violates the rights of the people that they took the money from, and not Harvard's rights, but the rights of the taxpayers. That's whose rights are violated by the initiate. But taking away a government grant, I don't think violates Harvard's rights or Columbia's or any other university because they don't have the right to that. Now, here's the argument. If you want an argument on this, on the other side, because it is good to try to think of it. They do have something approximating a contract. It's not exactly a contract, but something like it. And if we don't respect those things, even if they're not totally valid, the society is going to have our society is going to have a lot of trouble. There are all kinds of government contracts that are wrong, but if we suddenly canceled and got rid of those and just said, well, they're not valid because they're government contracts, the economy would probably fall apart. So there's some argument, but it still isn't, to me, an argument that Harvard's rights are being violated. I don't know what you think. What you guys think? Are the university's rights being violated when the federal government comes in and takes away their grant money?
Let's see if I can jump in. Is my audio any better, or my internet?
So far, so good.
All right, let's see. Well, first of all, we have super chat from Jonathan.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Super chat from Apollo Zeus. Thank you so much. He says, Lee, long time no see. How's things? Remember me?
I
Chris
do,
from the
sure
Clubhouse,
do. Yep.
Cutting Edge.
Yes, yeah, we had a lot of good times at Clubhouse.
And one more super chat from Apollo Zeus, who says, so glad ARCUK can afford Dr. Pearson back.
Oh, yeah. That's why I got paid the big bucks, right?
Yeah, it's coming any day now. Well, it's similar to Colombia. Unless you say certain things, we cannot.
Yeah.
But yeah, when we're going about the sort of that rights are being violated, and I think that is actually, and I'm not sure if this was specifically Harvard or Columbia, but one of the universities was trying to make a case that this is like a First Amendment thing, that basically, denying grants for them, that again is money taken from other people that would be given to Harvard University, is sort of violating the rights of the university.
First Amendment rights, you're saying, right?
First Amendment, because it's like for speech.
Yeah.
But again, that's not like your First Amendment. First Amendment rights doesn't mean that you have,
yes.
That you somehow like have. I mean, it's like a weird question. Like, let's say, like you said, I have like a contract with government, let's say, and it can be whatever, doesn't have to be education, but some contract with the government, and then government decides to take it away. And let's say the reasons are something I've said. It's still not, I don't think it can be like a First Amendment issue unless we are in sort of much different, in similar way, like using the sort of like the reasons government is using is the violation of Civil Rights Act, because Jewish students are being discriminated towards. That is the violation of the Civil Rights Act, and therefore that is being used as a justification.
But that part of the Civil Rights Act is from a philosophical standpoint is entirely invalid. That is, it's not the government's business to tell. If you had a real private school and they wanted to teach white supremacy, let's make it, or not even Nazism, again, you have to be careful that they're not talking about overthrowing the government. But if they wanted to teach let's say white supremacy, and they were entirely private, there would be no justification, even though it would be morally awful what they're doing. That doesn't give the government the right to come in and force them to do otherwise. So that provision of the Civil Rights, that part of the Civil Rights Act, is just simply invalid from a philosophical standpoint.
Well, the one that's being used here is that basically, I think it's like Title VI, basically, institution that is receiving federal money needs to uphold sort of certain standards, and part of them is non-discrimination.
Yeah. And that, I think, fits very well. That would fit very well with Ayn Rand's fairness doctrine, that you got to give a variety of viewpoints. Well, let's see, does it? Because if you say you can't, if it forbids, let's say, a white supremacist from holding a position at a university, I'm not sure. That's a tough case under that law. It's a tough case because it is certainly repugnant. But that's, again, free. The whole idea is to protect viewpoints that are dissenting viewpoints. Now, what Ayn Rand was concerned with was protecting viewpoints, for example, that were advocates of capitalism, of which there are very few in universities, and they get beat on all the time. So that's what she was thinking of, but it would have to apply across the board. Anyway, I don't know where to go with that, because the law is not quite proper. Not altogether proper. Some of it is and some of it isn't, as I recall.
Alex, would you like to jump in? I cannot see both of you at the same time, so I'm kind of guessing if somebody wants to speak.
I can see both of you.
No, I didn't have anything to say.
All right. So we're about halfway through the show. Lee, anything else you'd like to bring up on this topic? Or Alex, anything you'd like to bring on this topic?
I think that's the main thing is that, just to summarize, that in principle, you want to get rid of the research, not the research. You want to get rid of some of the research too, by the way. But in principle, you want to get rid of the government funding, in principle, over the long haul. In practice now, I think Ayn Rand's argument for fairness doctrine from the 1970s is still valid today, maybe even more so. Because I personally think things are worse, and the culture is worse now than it was back then. So it's maybe a more important thing if we want to try to retard, slow down. It's not going to solve anything. This kind of thing is not going to solve the problem. Having a fairness doctrine is strictly a stopgap measure, but we can hope that it, along with other things, might give us enough time. We can hope for educational efforts in the proper education and proper philosophy, to take hold, which will take a lot of time. So I'll leave it at that, I guess.
Yeah, and just to wrap up the topic for me, I always think of it as, I think a big problem with the biggest problem is with the universities themselves. And when you have people who, let's say, don't want to live, or in case of Harvard, don't really want to think, there is no forceful or no action you can sort of take to make them want to do that, right? There is no action.
Of course not. Yeah.
So that is sort of my biggest sort of worry, that we can take actions that maybe would slow down things or do something, but unless something changes with the sort of intelligentsia or whatever you want to call it itself, unless something changes with the ideas, then we are sort of on borrowed time.
Well, the physicist Max Planck once said that physics, let me see if I can't get the exact quote, but physics progresses one death at a time. I don't know if that's the exact quote, but the point was that the old guard have to just disappear. Well, the old professors in these universities are hopeless. You're not gonna save them. We have to wait until they retire, at least. If they don't die, they should at least retire and go away somewhere. Unfortunately, a lot of them retire and remain as emeritus professors and still cause trouble. But anyway, that's what we have to wait for as far as universities are concerned.
Oh, well, talking about a bit less somber topic, today is the Israeli Independence Day. And unfortunately, the Israel itself is not in the best shape. There is one of the biggest fires, at least I just got a message from Alex, I think, quoting some media saying that this is one of the biggest fires ever. So that is a bit unfortunate, but it shouldn't take away from the fact that Israel is a country that has been able to repel foreign forces for so long, and this is another year that it has been able to do.
You said fire, a fire, an actual fire, or a literal fire, or are we talking metaphorically here?
Yeah, there's a huge
actual
fires.
Fire.
It's not natural. It's arson. Well, the police are saying it's arson. It's terrorism.
Okay.
So close down the major highway. It's closed down. It's people are now evacuated from some very large cities, and now it's heading further eastward. So it'll come. It's. You should see some of the pictures of people that are actually running down the highway with their kids, holding their kids in their arms. And
it's interesting. That's first time I've heard of using forest fires. Smokey the Bear as a terrorist weapon. Maybe they've done before. I never heard of that before.
It kind of started with the condoms from a few years ago. So somebody thought it was a great idea, probably some international organization, in their eternal benevolence, thought it was a great idea to donate condoms to Gaza. and they took the condoms and they made incendiary devices from them.
Yeah.
And
Fill them full of
yes,
gasoline, sure.
well, that's it. Yeah, and balloons. And so they made them kind of as these, and they set fire to all of this shrubbery, massive damage in the south. So now we're seeing these fires in, I mean, but on a far larger scale in the Jerusalem area. And it's a very hot, very dry day. Very hot, very dry, and it sort of is the perfect storm. And now I think that after sort of the first fire, again, this is me speculating. I mean, there's been arrests made, and the Shin Bet, which is the Israeli Internal Security Services, are saying that there is arson going on. However, perhaps what would have happened is there could have been a natural small kind of fire that was started, and then it kind of maybe inspired some additional arsonists to join in the fun. And it is kind of, for them it would be kind of poignant to halt all Independence Day celebrations across the country, which is because you can't so it's not as if the government is saying don't have fun, guys. They're saying please do not have any events where you may need the fire service, right? So that's a lot of events. People are saying, hang on, we've got a stadium with 400 people, 500 people coming. We've got this party. We may need the fire service. Who knows? So people are just saying, no, we're canceling, or my insurance won't cover that if we don't have access to the fire brigade. So it has closed down all of the kind of the celebrations. And I mean, yeah, so me, in terms of the relation to the fire, I'm close. It's on, I mean, it's not far away from where I am. And it's heading kind of further east. And they've, I mean, now I don't think there's any public transport at least, coming into the city. So who knows? Who knows what eventually it's, going to happen. But my brother-in-law got engaged a few, minutes ago. So yeah, so it's actually all celebrations. Mazal tov to Liron. We love you. Have a great marriage. Lots of mazel tov.
And Bonnie was actually asking where Alex and Daniel are in relation to the fires. Why is she not asking where Lee is in relation to fires? So Alex is...
I'm in a deep bunker.
Yeah. So sort of the fires are sort of like in the east of Israel, around the Jerusalem area. I'm in the sort of like south of Tel Aviv. So last time I've seen fires haven't reached anywhere really close. So
they've had to evacuate Elad, which is I would say a more central city. However, they're now saying in terms of a distance, it is close. It's not that close. I mean, it's not close to where where Daniel is. In terms of like, it would take you 25 minutes to drive it or 30 minutes to drive it, right? It's not close, but it's not, I don't think he's at risk. But now the winds have changed direction, so they're heading back east, back to Jerusalem, where they started from. So that's coming back over this way, and they've evacuated quite a number of villages and quite a number of towns. But I don't think it really. I think I want to be extremely positive here as well, because when I think about where we were as in Israelis, where we were a year ago, it was really scary. I mean, it was the moments after Passover, and kind of the Easter holidays, it was really sad, because Jerusalem, during the Passover holidays, when all the kids are off school, and then the Easter holidays where all of the Christians are kind of celebrating, it's normally a time where you cannot get a restaurant in Jerusalem. It's very difficult to take the light rail because there's so many people. Everybody flocks to the city from all over the world. Okay. And it's wonderful, right? You feel the buzz as well, right? Of people, partying outside until 2 a.m., having fun. And it was so depressing because there was nobody, nobody was coming. And so you were feeling, and also there was a tremendous amount of kind of, oh my gosh, what uncertainty about the future. And then we managed to change it, with the pager attack. I think that was kind of the moment, the pivotal moment where everything sort of started to change, because it was really, really, really difficult. And just kind of today, in terms of like also a happy story for me, I went to the Ammunition Hill, which is this area in Jerusalem that was a site of a very big battle in 1967. It was actually under the control. So it was where all the ammunition of the Jordanian army was. Okay. And huge battles ensued. Okay. So I was there in the trenches, right? Literally in the
What year was this again?
I mean, I was not there physically in the trenches. I was there today in the trenches.
Oh, today?
Yeah.
This is back in the 67 war, did you say?
It was in 67.
Yeah, okay. Right.
So
a little before your time, I think.
Yeah, I was in the trench, one of the trenches today. And I also was kind of playing around, I think, in a tank. But it sort of really made you think about, some of the greatest victories, the Battle of the Bekaa Valley, in 1982, right, where Israel downed 90 Syrian MiGs, didn't lose a single jet, and it sort of just tremendous amount of celebration, tremendous amount, I think, pride. There's so much, I think, to be positive about. There's the incredible baby boom that we're experiencing here. And people say the baby boom of Israel and they go, oh, it must be all of kind of your your religious people that are having children. It's not true. It's the only country in the, I mean, of course they're having a lot of children, but it's the major factor, okay, for the baby boom are secular women with graduate degrees, which is unheard of, that they're having 3 children. Even you had the mayor of Tel Aviv saying everybody's having tons of children. Even when there's homosexual couples who are together for a long time, even then the average number of children is like 2. Okay, so it's like everybody is so it's tons of kids everywhere. And it's just so, that is also something I think that's worth celebrating, and not this in this kind of way like, oh, everybody needs to have lots of children or whatever. It shows there is a positivity, I think, for the future, right? That's why you want to build you want to plant trees, and you want to figure out water desalination, and you want to have these amazing scientific discoveries, is because you see a future, and yeah, so I think we have a lot of things to be proud of, and a lot of positivity.
Yeah, just to give some of my own comments. So as people probably now observe, I am in Israel, been here for a couple of days, first time in Israel. After what's his name, Douglas Murray said, you cannot talk about Israel unless you go. I realized I maybe need to go. I'm joking, of course. But yeah, I mean, what Alex said about it is really sort of unique. That Israel is the only developed nation that has sort of like the above replacement rate when it comes to children. And I think it does speak of something unique. And I even noticed it on the streets. Like you have like the so like children playgrounds like everywhere, all over Tel Aviv, all over everywhere I go, I see them all over the place. It really and even I mean, if we're just talking about Israel broadly, I mean, Tel Aviv itself is like an incredible city. Everything is being built. It keeps getting bigger. I saw like construction all over the place. And yeah, and you know, I haven't visited any other Middle Eastern nation, so I cannot comment that much in relation to that. But it really is like something unique here, and even the people sort of are, I think, different than I've seen in the world. Much more sort of active, which and aggressive, which in some places it's sort of it's not the nicest feature to have, but in many ways, that sort of ambition is something you really want to see in people, and it's definitely not something you can take for granted that it's something that just happens. That is, it is something that society needs to work towards. But to go to you, Lee, have you ever been to this
I'm going to inject a slight note of negativity in your wonderful positive psychology stuff here. All of that, all of the things you guys are talking about are all the more reasons why it is crucially necessary to settle Iran's hash, and soon. And I don't know, Trump is giving them a little time to try to make a deal, and they're just going to stall as long as they can. Obviously, they just keep stalling. But at least maybe there's some hope that would not have existed with Biden, say, that it's just at least some hope that there might be a major action. And a major action against Iran, I think, needs, you probably have discussed this already, but needs the United States involved, because the bunker buster huge bombs can only be carried by B-2 bombers, and Israel doesn't have any of those. If you really want to destroy the deep, all those centrifuges that are buried deeply, you need weapons that Israel doesn't have. I mean, they could go in maybe with a team of on the ground somehow. I don't know, but if you want to get them from the air, it's got to be the U.S. And I sure hope that something like that happens soon. Or I mean, I don't. It doesn't have to be military by us. If we could either do that or help the Iranians who hate their regime, of which there are many, to overthrow it, that would be good. That'd be the best way. But anyway, something has to be done soon. I assume you guys are on board with that. Something needs to be done.
I'm not convinced the Iranians would actually have a revolution. I think that
well, that's too bad.
I think that they fear, from what I have from the Iranians that I listened to a lot of Iranian media outside of Iran and inside, and they seem to really have quite a strong fear of what happened in Iraq, sort of where everything just kind of fell to pieces. So they really fear that. They really fear that will be this, that they will be Lebanon in 1982, right? Where it's just total civil war, total chaos. That they will have the kind of the Baluchis will be fighting the Azerbaijanis, and you'll have the Arabs will be fighting the Shias. It will just be, and you can see that. Yeah, I mean that's a
well.
Real
At least they're a little. It's a little different in the sense that the people in Iran are Persians. They're not Arabs. They have a 3,000-year-old culture, and the ones I know. I mean, this is anecdotal, so it's not. I can't say much for it, but are they would love to see the mullahs overthrown. They'd love it. But whether there's any, how to do that, I don't know. But that would be the best way. But failing that, if that's impossible, I don't think it's likely that any negotiated agreement is going to be that'd be worth anything, because you'd have to have one where the agreement would have to be no nuclear weapons, no centrifuge facilities for refining, plutonium and such, none of that, and you're open for inspection at all times everywhere. And are they going to ever agree to that? That's the only way it would be possible to have an agreement. And would they ever agree? So I don't hold out much hope for that that art of the deal approach to this. It needs to be bombs, I guess, and it needs to. I was afraid you were going to say you didn't think the Iranians would use their nuclear weapons, but I'm not sure you can be confident of that. I think they might well use the nuclear weapons because they're death lovers after all. So, given that, you want to keep that wonderful spirit of Israel and Tel Aviv. I hate to say it, but it would take only one. It wouldn't even have to be a 10 megaton bomb. One thermonuclear weapon could pretty well end Israel. Mm-hmm. And so something needs to be done about that, I would think, soon.
Yeah. Also, the U.S. doesn't. The U.S. can just lend us, can just kind of give us the keys for the bomber.
The V2 bomber.
We'll return it. We'll put
That's
it
a good
the
idea. If you got a good driver. If you have somebody who can drive it.
Why not? Yeah. I'm sure that Israel would be really kind of up for that, right? Why not? It's then they can have their sort of plausible deniability, or also you don't necessarily need to get all the way down into the bunker. Maybe you just need to destroy the entrance and the exit. That's also
maybe
kind of
I don't know.
kind of an option.
I don't know. Maybe that's an interesting idea. I don't know.
Yeah, I also don't know. I'm trying to put things out there, right?
And also, they probably have some of their facilities in hospitals in Tehran. Or probably have some centrifuges working right now in some hospital in Tehran, since that's the standard operating procedure for protecting stuff. But you could get. I think we could get a long way by a good campaign to wipe out their main facilities that are buried in the mountains.
The problem is if we would have to do that again in a year or in 9 months, right? That's also, it's destroying it, and then it's kind of reminds me a little bit of the Stutex virus, the computer virus, the computer worm that we put in the Iranian nuclear facility. It caused a cyber arms race between Israel and Iran. And it kind of changed the dynamics. So that could potentially happen if there was to be like a kinetic war as well. It could be this is just this is on the table now. This is just something we do to each other now. And that, so it's also, I hope smarter people than me are thinking about this. I mean, I know they are. And it's,
well, that seems to argue for regime change as the only way out of this.
Right.
And on the other hand, we better hope that the speed of light defensive weapons, lasers and such, will mature quickly. I certainly hope that, because that would be a defense against missile attack. If you had a good if you had a good laser defense, that might help us against Putin, say, for example, or the Chinese.
We have the iron beam. You have the iron beam.
Yeah, iron beam.
We don't have it in space, though. That would be nice.
It's not. It's a little short range, and it's not really deployed yet, I don't think. Or maybe
it's been live for a few months. It's been live. It's I've seen her go. But it'll be a little bit like the Iron Dome. Like the Iron Dome didn't work for like a few years. It'll have to be battle tested. And then it'll be really great. But I would like to see that thing put up into space. And then it could just kind of be an umbrella for.
Yeah, I mean, also with the missile with missile defense as we now have it, you send $1 million anti-missile up against $1,000 piece of junk missile, and eventually you go bankrupt by doing that. Eventually.
Yeah, which is why the laser is such a groundbreaking kind of piece of technology.
For people who are more interested on Stuxnet, they can actually look up Stuxnet Ayn Rand Center UK, since me and Alex have talked about it in the past. If people are eager for more Alex, they can check out older episodes. If people are eager for more Lee, we still have old episodes of Cutting Edge, which was his show, so people can check that out.
And we're gonna do that again at some point. We've just been busy with other stuff, and but we'll get some cutting edges out there. Soon, I hope.
Someone in the chat is suggesting that maybe the Jews would be more safer if they just lived on the moon. I just wanted to let everybody know I'd be up for it. Okay, I would be up for it. If anybody wants to come, we can be the pioneers of the moon. We'll have to figure out a couple of technicalities, but it'll be great. People said that about Israel back in the day.
Food,
It'll
water,
never work.
oxygen.
You'll die. Yeah. I mean,
stuff like that.
There you go.
I mean,
Yes.
if the
protection from the Chinese who will be there also.
there are
a few little issues.
If the book "Moon is a Harsh Mistress" is anything to go by, that will be a capitalist society. So maybe that's the only way to truly reach capitalism is to do it inside.
Well, in that book, the loonies, as they called themselves, the loonies had the advantage because they're at the top of a gravity well, and they could throw rocks at Earth, and they did. So they have an advantage in that respect.
So when you said we need like $1 million rockets for to destroy, we just need to invert that, and that's how Israel can finally sort of fully defend itself. Maybe somebody in the chat is on the right track. We just need to figure out the logistics. With that, Alex, any last thoughts, and where can people find you?
Yeah, everybody just have a great Independence Day if you're celebrating. And yeah, so I'm here on ARC UK sometimes, and I really recommend IDSF, and that's have a great day, everybody.
Yeah, you too.
And Lee, any last thoughts on where can people find you or follow you?
Nowhere. I'm keeping a low profile these days, pretty much. We're working on stuff, though. We're gonna try to save Western civilization through education. I am working with Ed Thompson, Harry Binswanger, and myself are trying to get the training in introspection into the schools. And if that happens, that's going to make, over a long period, that's going to make a lot of difference, I think, in the culture, because the kids nowadays don't know how to sit. That's an acronym: sustain independent thinking. They don't know how to do that. Some of them do in particular fields, like computer science, they can write a program, or mathematics or something. But when they get to broad issues, they're like, so many of them are like helpless children, and you can see that with the protests at Columbia. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't even know what they're protesting about. They don't have the facts. Anyway, I and some others have been working on that. So, but perhaps you'll have me back, Daniel.
It would definitely be great to have you on. And when you said, you're talking about sitting, I was just looking at me because I'm in a Turkish sitting. I don't know if that's also an English phrase. It's like a Slovak phrase that we use, like a Turkish sitting. I don't know if it translates well. Maybe it does. But with that, I think we had a great show today. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode of The Daily Objective, as well as the reality show. And until then, bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, guys.